All right, well, let's move on to our second of three topics. And our second topic we just want to start to touch into, and we'll follow up in subsequent podcasts, and that is the Darknet. And some of you may have heard about the Darknet. Some of you probably haven't. And so I'm going to first start out with putting you on the spot, Dan, and tell us, what is the Darknet?
Well, the Darknet, what most people think of, let me tell you what it is in comparison. So most people, when they're online, they go on a normal computer, they go on Chrome, they go on, any kind of normal browser. They're on the normal internet, the clear net, the top net. That's the internet that we all use on a daily basis. The Darknet is a section of the internet was initially developed by the U.S. Navy using a specialized browser called Tor. And Tor is a browser that allows you to see sites through what's called the onion router or the .onion type sites. And these are sites that if you went to using your normal Chrome browser, you would not be able to see. They would look like absolutely nothing. It's a way to anonymize, obscure, and in many ways encrypt communication on what you would refer to as the underbelly of the internet. Probably less than 1% of all internet sites available online are on the Darknet. The most famous one that people know of in the illegal world, and probably still 80% of that is still a lot of illegal content, was Silk Road, in Ross Ulbricht's Silk Road that came to the attention in 2014, 2015.
So let me back up and ask you a couple of questions. So if an average user wanted to get on the Darknet, can they just go to their regular browser, whether Internet Explorer or Safari or Chrome or Firefox, and get on the Darknet through their regular internet browser?
They cannot.
What do they have to do?
They'd have to download a browser called Tor, also known as the onion router. So you would go to tor.org and you would download that browser, and that browser would then allow you to see the sites that are available on the Darknet.
And what type of sites are we talking about on the Darknet?
Well, again, the Darknet and Tor was originally started for legitimate reasons, for military personnel serving overseas, for whistleblowers wanting to do anonymous communications back and forth to press sites. But soon after that came, which is not uncommon with things on the internet, it was more sort of co-opted by more criminal elements. And I would say about 80% of the sites on the Darknet now, about 700-some thousand sites, a good portion of them are drug marketplaces to buy stolen identity information. There's some fringe sites on there where people are selling guns, explosives. There's certainly a lot of illegal pornography, including child pornography, snuff videos. I mean, it's a fairly wild west. We have a presentation, Mark, that I would tell you about that we're doing for a lot of law firms and for law enforcement groups that goes through kind of the history of the Darknet and goes through how it's accessed and what it kind of looks like in today's version. It's about a 45-minute presentation. We may be doing a special recording and post it up on the website, but it would really give people a lot more depth. I'll tell you this. It's something that you need to understand because it's going to affect your businesses and your children and your family a lot more than you think. Not just the ability to buy illegal drugs, but, hackers, stolen intellectual property, hackers for hire. We refer to, and I know all of us know what, software as a service is, but change the S in the front of that and put a C now. And it's the new mantra and this is really the golden age of cybercrime, is crime as a service.
Well, let me ask you a few questions about that.
Yeah.
So what type of hacking or intrusion or criminal networking services can somebody readily obtain on the darknet? And why does it matter to the listeners if they're working for a small, medium-sized, or even large corporation?
Well, let me give you a couple examples. If I wanted to knock my competitor's site offline, I could, for a few $100s or less, go on the darknet and order a DDoS attack, which would take a competitor's website offline. If I wanted to hire a sophisticated hacker to hack someone's email, like John Podesta, I could hire that person online, oftentimes for a few $100s or $1,000. There are people deal with these ransomware cases, but a lot of people don't understand, how to launch a ransomware attack. Maybe you're not a hacker or a software person. You can go hire crime as a service online. So it is more readily available than anything I've ever seen in the blue or white collar world. And, one of the things that we talk about on the presentation, Mark, which is really interesting, is a lot of the services are paid for in cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. So even the telltale signs that I know you used to look for, follow the money, right? Back in your days as an assistant U.S. attorney, this money would be a lot harder to follow.
And so let's just zero in on a DDoS attack, which is a denial of service attack, where what happens is you would take somebody's website and you'd flood it with requests, and thereby overloading the web servers and effectively taking the site down. That's the type of service that you could readily obtain on the darknet?
Mark, if I told you how many vendors I've seen hawking DDoS services, it'd shock you. I mean, I'm not talking about 5, 10, I'm talking hundreds. And the pricing is coming down because the criminals are competing with each other for the buyer. And so I've seen things as low as $10, $25. I mean, it's really pretty amazing.
Supply and demand.
And let's
Brett, you'll know, back, I would say 5 years ago, 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, the people that could pull that level of sort of DDoS attack off was not a huge population. And what I'm seeing on the darknet is, one vendor sells the other vendor the wholesale skill to be able to do the DDoS attack. So not only are there people that are doing the attacks and you can hire them, there's vendors selling the wholesale software to teach others to do it.
Right, exactly.
Really stunning.
And something else that's becoming very prevalent on, or has been very prevalent on the darknet, is the sale of identities. When some of these places get breached and all of this information gets captured for people's private information, that gets sold on the market. So you could buy someone's identity and assume their identity for X number of dollars.
I've got a couple of more follow-up questions for you, Dan. One, explain what you mean by a ransomware attack and how that might play out for some of the small and medium-sized businesses out there, and what type of information we're talking about.
Well, I'm going to tee that to Brett because Brett's worked on a number of ransomware attacks. Let me just say this before he gives the explanation of what that is. You can buy that service online and have someone target someone for you. So in the past, you had to have the sophistication to do it yourself. Now with the SaaS, I don't know how you want to say that, SaaS as a service, CRAS as a service, I'm not sure how you'd exactly say it, but you can go buy that and get someone to hammer your competitor or, the school that you don't like. But why don't you give an example, Brett, of some of the cases we worked on that?
Sure. One that really sticks in my mind, a small company, one of the employees was sitting at their desk surfing the web. They went to a very familiar news site, and as many news sites they have banner ads along the borders of your web browser. They saw a banner ad that looked interesting. They clicked on that banner ad, and bada bing, they got infected with what typically would be a virus. But in this case, the virus is much more sophisticated, and what it does is it goes about the task of very specifically encrypting all of your Office documents, Word documents, Excel documents, PowerPoint, anything that's not operating system related. And then when it's done, it pops up and it says, guess what? You've been infected. You've been encrypted. Pay us this money and we'll give you the decryption code.
And we've seen this type of scam or scheme. It seems very prominently in the medical field where there are patient records or HIPAA protected records. Are there other areas that this is common as well?
I think it really depends on the value of the data. Because in the medical community, having lost access to patient records, that's a big deal. That can shut a hospital down. The same thing applies to large corporations. You shut down their ability to recover financial information. You've effectively shut them down for a period of time. The most important thing to remember about the ransomware infection process is that if you're sitting in a company or a corporate enterprise level network and you've got drives mapped to servers, when that device is done encrypting, it goes out and starts encrypting the servers. And so it spreads very, very quickly. It's very efficient when it comes to spreading out. And the next thing you know, your Fortune 500 corporation is brought to its knees because all of your servers have been encrypted.
I've got one other area that I forgot to ask you about, Dan, and that is, can you buy services on the Darknet to inflict reputational damage?
Yes, there's people that specialize in doing just that, and one thing I want to add to what Brett just said is, remember, the ransom payments are asked oftentimes in Bitcoin, and we'll discuss this at a later time in some other podcasts, but Bitcoin is an important currency to understand, the cryptocurrency, both for many legitimate purposes, but also for many criminal activities, in particular, so that it makes it difficult for law enforcement people and for investigators to follow the money. Very difficult to follow the money. The same thing is true in when you're talking about reputational damages. In traditional cases, we would go back and say, someone posted these comments to these particular websites, and we want to identify who posted those comments. And, Brett and I worked on a number of cases like this where we've gone back and we said, okay, you can tell this IP address or this IP address near the home or business of the person that we suspected, in fact, went to that site and said these following things about a person. The question is, when you remove that step, so the person wanting to do damage, connecting to the site, the Yelp type site, the LinkedIn type site, to put the comments about the person, and you remove that and you take it to a third person who is an expert in anonymizing themselves and not leaving traces of who they are, and that person's paid in difficult to follow Bitcoin, the ramifications are pretty deep, because we know the internet, especially when it comes to the big sites like the Yelps and the LinkedIns of the world, those salacious kind of comments and content seem to follow their way to the top, right? More people start viewing them and commenting on the comments, and they seem to have a way of getting on life on their own, and they're very difficult. And Mark, you might be able to talk a little bit about this, getting those comments taken down.
Yeah, certainly that can be challenging. It depends on the nature of the comment and most importantly, probably depends on the terms of service of a given service. So a lot of the services now have guidelines for users and for posting, that it can't be profane, it can't be insulting, things of that nature. But certainly if it appears to just be negative comments, whether true or not, but there are evenly delivered, they'd be very difficult to remove and take down. So you'd have to, go out and prove that it was defamatory, which of course is a lengthy and difficult process. So, barring very specific types of barred comments or language, it can be difficult. So what you really have to do is try and identify where that's coming from and try and put a stop to it. So can be challenging, to say the least.
Yeah, and I think, Mark, too, it can be time consuming, right? I mean, there are so many different sites. There's new sites coming up all the time. And I think people should be aware of the fact that when there's services online that talk about, not only reputation damage from the darknet, but then there's service providers that talk about the ability to sort of clean up these issues online. And I've just been, as I've watched them and knowing the complexity and the details that it takes to do that, I certainly don't want someone who's had a reputation damage to get scammed trying to clean up the damage that someone else has done. It's not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of time, and you need to deal with someone that's experienced in addressing it.
Well, this has been a great discussion about the darknet, both enlightening and terrifying, and I'm sure we'll follow up with several other pieces and subsequent podcasts on different parts of the darknet as we continue to expand on our series in our podcasts.